Hello, I'm Geraldine and these are my novel opinions. In this video I would like to do a roundup of the 7 books that I read in September this year. Fairly good reading month. And to start off with, my first book that I read this month was Flesh by David Szalay. Now this is the story of a man, although he's a boy when we first meet him, he's only 15, and he and his mother have just moved to a new town, and he is struggling to make friends or form meaningful relationships, and that becomes a little bit of a theme throughout the book for him. Some people have said this is the story of a man to whom life just happens, but I would completely disagree with that. He has some major life events, but they happen between the chapters. We meet him after each big life event has happened, and a lot of those events would have taken some serious decision making and action on his part. So he's definitely not a completely passive character. I think that view partly comes from the fact that we don't see him making any of these decisions, but also because his conversation is sparse, to say the very least. He says very little in this book. His responses when people are talking to him are minimal, and he does come across as a very distant character. But he's not cold in the least. So it is fascinating to watch him as he goes through life, and seeing what does happen in his life. The next book I read was The South by Tash Aw. Now, I loved reading this book while I was actually reading it. It's very sweet and engaging, and it has plenty of sympathetic characters as well as some less sympathetic ones. And it discusses themes like how quite often our life decisions are taken out of our hands in one way or another, even when we're adults. And I suppose in some ways we could compare it to Flesh in that respect. It also discusses how much we inherit characteristics from our parents, however much we don't think we do or we don't want to. It just tends to happen like that. It was beautifully written, but not a lot happens, and this is the first of a quartet, and I think, frankly, it probably would have been better if the 4 books had been condensed into one. It would have made it a more compelling read, I think. But as I say, some of the writing is absolutely lovely, and some of the characters you'll fall in love with. So it's certainly not a wasted read. I'm glad I read it. The next book I read was Love Forms by Claire Adams. Now, as much as I was enjoying reading this at first, I started to get a little bit frustrated, and then I had a bit of a revelation. It's billed as the story of a woman who gave a child up for adoption when she was young, and she's now searching for that child, but that isn't the story of the book. It's more the story of how a major life event can affect every aspect of our lives for the rest of our lives. It just bleeds into everything we do. And after I realised that, I enjoyed it an awful lot more. And it's a lovely book. People have criticised it for going into too much detail. And I think I agree with that to some extent. There might be reasons why it goes into so much detail. Savidge suggested that it could be the whole book is just a letter to someone, and she needs to explain certain things. So that could be the reason for the detail. But despite all that, by the end, I was a complete emotional wreck, which for me is always the sign of a very good book, one that I've enjoyed enormously. That rounds up my book reading for September. The next book I read was We Pretty Pieces of Flesh by Colwill Brown. This was another book that left me an absolute emotional wreck, and I absolutely loved it by the end, but I struggled at first. It's written in Doncaster vernacular, but that wasn't the problem. It was stronger than I was expecting, but I soon got into the swing of it. It was more that I struggled with sympathy for the characters. But as you go along, you learn more about them and you start to love them. It has themes of class and so on, and in particular, that all three girls, it's about three teenage girls growing up in Doncaster. All of them are working class, but one comes from a particularly poor family. And there are prejudices about the type of person she is, which becomes a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy for her, which is very sad. And it also discusses how we never really know what's going on in other people's heads. We tend to think that everybody else has their stuff together and we're the only ones who are unsure of ourselves and don't really know what we're doing and so on. And it's not the case. If only we could see what other people were thinking, we'd probably feel an awful lot better. And this leads to a suggestion. It doesn't lead to a sliding doors moment, but the reader is invited to wonder how things might have been different if a word here or there had been said earlier. But ultimately, yes, this was a fantastic book. I absolutely loved it. The next book I read was A Room Above a Shop by Anthony Shapland. Now this is a very quiet, gentle book with some not so gentle happenings in it. It's about two men in 1980s Wales who are trying to conduct their relationship in secret. Now it's written in a very poetic style, which doesn't suit me. That's not the fault of the book, that's my failing. But it also meant that, and I think this is generally speaking, it keeps the characters at a distance from the reader. And I think also that meant that some of the more emotional scenes in it didn't have quite the impact that they might have done. I mean, maybe that's not the case for other people. I really don't get on with flowery writing at all. It's just like that bit of my brain is missing. I just want to be told how it is, what's going on. But I can absolutely see why other people have utterly adored this book. But for me, it wasn't quite there. And I mean, I did enjoy it, but as I say, I didn't get as much out of it as I think many other people will. Now, after all those rather depressing reads, I thought I wanted something light and fluffy. So I reached for The Ghost Cat by Alex Howard. And in some ways it fitted the bill. It was light and fluffy. But, oh dear, no, it didn't do it for me. It's the story of a cat who dies in 1902 in Edinburgh. And he is allowed 8 hauntings over the next 120 years to fulfill his 9 lives. And each time he appears, it's a few decades, a decade or 2 or 3 further on, and he discovers new inventions and new historical events. And at the end of each chapter, they're all summarised in a little list. And I thought, oh, well, I've probably picked up a children's book by mistake. So I carried on reading because, there were some very good children's books out there. But then as we got into the 60s, the F-bombs started dropping. And I thought, well, this clearly isn't for children. And I don't know what it's for. It seemed all of the history was treated very lightly, very brief covering mention. I mean, it covered World War II, and didn't go into any detail about why the war was going on. Or he just went down into a bomb shelter. And so I really don't know who this book is for. It's not for children. It's not for adults who really want to find out about history. And there wasn't really much about him being a cat either. So I don't know what the aim of the author was or who he intended to read this book. So I'm afraid that's probably, well, definitely my worst read of the month and possibly the year. Maybe that's a little bit unfair. It wasn't aimed at me, so perhaps I'm being harsh. But it had a cat in it, so, you know, it's not all bad. Finally, I read The Impossible Fortune by Richard Osman. This is the 5th in the Thursday Murder Club series, and it's very much more of the same. It's still charming and endearing and funny. So from that point of view, I did enjoy it. However, it is getting a little bit tired now. We know what Joyce is like. We know that she goes on irrelevant rambles. So I don't think we need quite as much of it. This book is 432 pages long, which is quite long. And so we, as amusing as they are, we don't need quite so many irrelevant ramblings. It's not like a Jessica Fletcher where somebody's throwaway comment will suddenly spark the connection in Jessica Fletcher's mind, makes them think, oh, I know who the murderer is now. They're just nothing to do with the plot. Having said that, there were some very smart twists and turns, plenty that I didn't see coming, a couple that I did, and one that I thought I could see coming but then didn't. So from that point of view, it's still very good. But I think that he is going to have to come up with some new ideas if he's going to continue this series any longer, which it sounds like he is. And I'm very pleased that he is, because I enjoy them. They're a good romp. But I think, I suspect he's so successful that editors are rather afraid to start encroaching on his work. But I think they've got to be a little bit tougher with him. He needs some new ideas. He needs to be kept on track. I think it'll be a while before the 6th one comes out, because he's doing another one of his We Solve Murders series next, which I didn't enjoy the first one. So I probably won't be reading that, but who knows, maybe. But it's well worth a read. If you enjoyed the first 4, you will definitely enjoy this one. But as I say, it's just beginning to get a little bit wearing. You think, yeah, okay, we get the joke. You know, we've heard it a million times before. But it's always fun spending more time with characters that you enjoy. So I'm not at all sorry that I read it. As I say, I did enjoy it. It was great fun. That's all for September. I'm currently partway through the original by Nell Stevens, so that'll be the first one that I round up in October. I'm currently enjoying it very much. I will let you know how that goes next month. So I look forward to seeing you then. Just as an aside, I hope that lighting isn't too harsh in this. My previous 2 videos were filmed entirely in natural light. I'm sitting in a north-facing room for the evenness of light, but I've had to film this in the evening, and the light's been getting lower and lower. It's completely dark out there now. It wasn't when I first started, so I'm using a ring light, and it's the first time I've used it, and I'm not sure whether it's a little bit too harsh, but we shall see. So I will see you at the end of October with my reads for that month.